If only Hollywood had listened to Eric Kane at Forbes magazine 5 months ago when he said The Crow remake looks like a soulless Hollywood abomination. Because you're not going to believe how poorly this terrible movie did at the box office this past weekend. Renegade Online. And I'm sorry, I've got to laugh at this so much. Do y'all remember that movie, The Crow? I loved it. Brandon Lee, back in the 90s, one of the greatest soundtracks of any film ever made. An incredible story. Ernie Hudson from the Ghostbusters, Winston Zeddemore, he was in it, played the cop. Just a great cast, a great movie all around. Well written, well acted, and for some reason, somebody in Hollywood decided, hey, I have an idea. Let's go ahead and do a remake of it for modern audiences. It turned out about as well as you'd think. Deadpool and Wolverine pulling the feathers off of the Crow and putting Blink Twice to sleep as summer winds down. Sunday AM box office. This was the headline on Deadline today. And blame the lack of want to see it fair in addition to the return to school, as this penultimate weekend of summer is coming in at $94.5 million for all movies, 33% down from last weekend. This is the third lowest weekend of this summer after the first weekend of June, post-Memorial Day frame, $66.3 million, and the first weekend of May, $73.9 million per Box Office Mojo. So you can see here, we're kind of hitting that edge, right? We're slinging into September. The box office behaviors change. People aren't going to go to the movies quite as much, but then again, there's nothing driving them into theaters right now. But let's talk about what the real story is with this, because it's not just the fact that Deadpool actually pulled it off again, I think, in its fifth weekend. The story is The Crow. $4.6 million opening weekend. Again, $4.6 million. How does that happen? Wow. I mean, again, our expectations for you were low, but holy crap. That's absolutely humiliating. That is beyond humiliating. People that have been seeing early sneak peeks, images from the set, all this stuff in the last year, taking a look at this, taking a look at what they were doing with the character. It just doesn't have the same feel, the same look, the same tone, nothing. All they did was basically just steal the story, slap a new look on it, and then that was the end of it. It's ridiculous. So I can't even, why do this? Why do this at all? But they did it and they got $4.6 million for it. And they spent, now this is the good news. They only spent $50 million to make it, which let's hope that production budget is relatively accurate. Okay. But $50 million for this film. The first one was extremely low budget for its day and age. But this one, $50 million. All this movie really had to do just to cover its floor. This movie had to make about $100 million around the entire world to cover its production budget. I don't know what the marketing budget is for this. I have a feeling that they did not spend a whole lot of money on it. This was a Lionsgate release, so not one of the major distribution channels, but a mid-major for sure. Lionsgate, I mean, they've put out some very, very big names and big titles. This apparently was not one of them. And they had some IMAX screens, they had PLFs. I mean, when you look at everything they had, this movie, it should have done 4 or 5 times this easily on an opening weekend. But alas, it didn't. International, you can see here, we just don't have the international figures in yet. And a lot of these places opened up. You can see this weekend, August 22nd, in a lot of these territories. There's still a few outstanding, like Australia, Austria. Those are still a couple of weeks away. Germany still a couple of weeks away. Otherwise, Spain, Sweden, I mean, the UK, it's open. We just don't have the data in yet. But look, if it did $4.6 million in the US and Canada, I don't think this is going to have done substantially better overseas. I mean, $10 million would be significantly better. I mean, maybe it will. Maybe people overseas, I don't know. I don't know. European tastes can be weird, especially for politics in this day and age, but I don't know about film, but this just didn't do it. Let's actually look at the whole weekend, because this is what we really want to take a look at. 5 weekends in release. Deadpool and Wolverine is still top tier. They took, I think, a second-place seat last weekend with the premiere of Alien Romulus, but Alien Romulus had a staggering drop-off, 61%. I mean, it's not quite as bad as some of the worst MCU titles, but it's still up there. Anything north of 60% for a second weekend drop is pretty significant, and it's not as if Alien Romulus opened up with a super high opening weekend to begin with. So let's take a look at the full weekend chart. Deadpool and Wolverine is still driving things. And that's great for the MCU, and hopefully it will be good for the fans of the MCU long term, that this is going to hopefully send a very clear signal, as we've talked about, as has been rumored, that Marvel might be trying to turn a corner, get rid of the garbage that they put out in phases 4 and 5. Although there are some rumors out there from Marvel suggesting that people like Ms. Marvel and Shang-Chi and some of these other characters that, frankly, nobody cares about are going to play some type of pivotal role when it comes to the next Avengers culmination in a few years. I don't know. I hope that's not going to be the case, because you're going to alienate the audience that you're trying to build a goodwill with right now. But Deadpool and Wolverine coming in at $18.3 million. Alien Romulus coming in at $16.2. The Blake Lively movie, It Ends With Us, still hanging in there in week 3, which, look, for this Blake Lively film, $242 million globally. I don't believe. Production budget of $25 million. This movie made a mint. This movie made an absolute mint on its budget. This is from Sony Pictures. So, again, good on Sony. They made a ton of money with this one, probably way more than they anticipated at the box office. I honestly, I don't know a whole lot about this movie, if anything at all. I'm assuming it's probably some type of rom-com or something. I don't know. Don't care. Not my cup of tea, but good for Sony, because apart from this, this means they're still going to get another big fat check from Netflix at the end of the day. Everybody's going to be very happy with this. Everybody's going to make a ton of money, and that's all she wrote. But if we go and we look to see where the rest of things are, look how far down the list. On a premiere weekend for a major remake like this, The Crow came in at number 8. 8! What? How? Unbelievable. It got beat out by a re-release of Coraline. Do y'all remember this? Just the animated, like, stop motion, or I don't remember exactly what it was, but Coraline re-released, and it did $5 million. This came out in 2009. This movie is 15 years old. All they did was an end-of-summer re-release of Coraline, and it beat The Crow. And it beat The Crow by about $500,000. And look at the number of theaters that it was in. The Crow opens up with 2,752 screens. Coraline, re-released 15 years later with what is it, 1,422 screens. I mean, The Crow had almost double the number of screens. Look at the per theater average. Coraline, $3,500 per theater this weekend. The Crow, $1,600. What a mess. What an absolute mess. Twisters, in its 6th weekend, still beat The Crow. Twisters, again, one of these movies that just hanging around. And good on them, hit the wrong switch. Good on Twisters for this, because if you look at this, 347 million worldwide box office. Now, again, we talked about this before. This movie showing $155 million production budget, which is believable, given what they did with it, the scope of it. That being said, look, did the movie probably completely break even, or will it completely break even at the box office? It seems unlikely when you factor in marketing, when you factor in what they spent globally to advertise this. Now, look, this movie is 2.5 times more popular in the U.S. than it is internationally. I suspect distribution at Universal recognized this, but again, this movie will go to Netflix when all's said and done. The live-action movies, or excuse me, Amazon Prime, live-action movies from Universal will go to Peacock for a few months, 3-4 months, when they get to streaming. And after that, they will be put on Amazon Prime, in this case, for the 10 middle months of the pay one window. And Amazon Prime is paying Universal big money. Both Amazon and Netflix have billion-dollar contracts with Universal for different respective products that they throw into theaters. So in the long run, this movie probably will be fine, although I'm assuming they probably hoped that it would make a little bit more, at least internationally. But I tell you what, domestically, for this movie bringing in $250 million, this is not attached to a major piece of IP. This apparently was just a fun movie that everybody liked. And it's still hanging around here in a good spot in theaters, because nothing is really, I mean, look at where it is in its position here. It is still sitting in the number 6 spot and just beat out The Crow, a brand new film. And Twisters, again, is 6 weeks old. It's amazing. The Forge, be honest with you, I don't know anything about it. It looks like a made-for-television movie that Sony just threw into theaters, figuring why not. But then you get to the top 3, like I said, with Alien Romulus, It Ends With Us, the Blake Lively film, Deadpool and Wolverine. Sony's actually having a pretty good year so far when you consider everything in the same spot. And I'm impressed. I really, truly am impressed with this, with how they're doing this. Alien Romulus, let's take a look at this one real quick. Alien Romulus, I don't know how much further this is going to go, with a 62% drop in the second weekend, $72.6 million internationally, $152 million. So this is obviously doing fairly well in the international side of things. And worldwide, 225. It's still got a hefty budget, and 80 million. Look, it's respectable, and for where it is now, it's obviously covered its floor. It's covered its production costs. It's still got a ways to go, I'm sure, with whatever was spent on the marketing side of things from Fox and Disney. But this is, I'm assuming, it's going to wind up on probably not Disney Plus, but Hulu, which is still effectively Disney. It's a little bit different than the Disney in-house stuff, but when you look at this and you say $80 million, if this is actually what the Fox studio wound up doing on this, if they kept it under tight control, believable, I guess, in that regard. But if they really did keep that budget under tight control, then this movie will be okay. It's not going to be great. If this thing might finish up around, say, maybe 300 million. Depends on how well the international legs keep stretching. But if you look at this thing, look, China, 26 million is the biggest single international piece of this. Fox is getting about 25% of that back. So really only about, say, $5 to $6 million, somewhere in that range, is what they're getting back from there. So, at this point, if they've really got around $100 million in the till, they spent $80 million to make it. They probably spent another $75 to $80 million on global marketing for this film. It's just what it costs these days. I still have not gotten a chance to see it. Hopefully I will. But be that as it may, let's get on to the continued, champion of the weekend here, Deadpool and Wolverine, now at 1.2 million worldwide box office. If you remember, several weeks ago, I told you I thought this movie was going to pretty much level off somewhere between 1.2 and 1.3 billion. And that's pretty much where we are right now. I think it may have another 100 million in the tank between international and domestic. Maybe it goes a little bit over 1.3. It depends on how long it just kind of lingers in the box office. There's also something to be said that there is not a whole lot of competition out there right now for this film in terms of the type of audience that it would attract. It doesn't look like Alien Romulus is going to continue to pose any threat. It did in the first weekend, but then it kind of died down. But when you're talking about Deadpool and Wolverine, rumored to have cost $200 million, did it actually? We don't know. Disney has a habit of going way over the stated budgets, but knowing Ryan Reynolds and how he operates, I could believe that it stayed closer to that. Of course, I think a large portion of that was probably getting Hugh Jackman to come in and put that suit on. So that probably a big chunk of that was his paycheck. It wouldn't surprise me at all. $50 million was. I don't know if there was a figure out there that somebody actually got the number on it, but we've seen some numbers recently for some of the rumors that people are suggesting that Robert Downey Jr. got for his return to the MCU as Doctor Doom, at least insofar as we know right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but Deadpool and Wolverine, I mean, it only dropped 39% from the previous weekend. If we see continued 40%-ish drops next weekend, that means it should be bringing in maybe around 10 to 11 million. And if we continue to see that weekend over weekend, school is back in session, so the weekday box office is not going to be what it was 3 weeks ago, for example. A lot of it's going to be loaded into weekends going forward. And I think a lot of the folks that wanted to have seen this movie have already seen it. If they wanted to see it again, it's probably already happened. So we're starting to see that ramp down. But again, a great run for them. Disney's probably taken home somewhere to the order of around $600 million. I think if they spent even on the high side around, say, $400 million in total, they've already got $600 million back from Deadpool and Wolverine. They've finally got an MCU title for the first time since 2019 that is profitable. Hell, this is one of the first, this and Inside Out 2, one of the first two things that Disney has had in 5 years that has clearly turned a profit for the company. So applause to them. Will it continue? I don't necessarily know, and I wouldn't hold my breath. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.